returned after Waterloo, he'd been able to assure himself that that need was only natural. His association with 6 others so very like himself, all equally in need of wives, and the camaraderie that had flowed through their formation of the Bastion Club, their last bastion against the matchmaking mammas of the temps, had reassured and soothed his impatience and blunted the spur for some months. But now Tristan Weems and Tony Blake had both found and secured their wives, while he, with his more edgy, restless, desperate need, was still waiting for his lady to appear. It had taken the last few weeks in London, being sucked into the whirl as society prepared for the intense months of the season, to comprehend fully what fed that increasingly edgy need. For 13 years he'd been dislocated, cut off from the society to which he'd been born and to which he'd now returned. He'd spent 13 tense years buried in enemy territory, never relaxing, never less than alert and aware. Now, even though he knew he was home and the war was over, he still found himself at parties, balls, any large gathering, mentally apart. Still the disguised outsider watching, observing, never able to let down his guard and freely merge. He needed a wife to connect him again, to be a bridge between him and all around him, especially in the social sense. He was an earl, with numerous sisters, relatives, connections, and obligations. He couldn't hide himself away. He didn't want to hide himself away. He was constitutionally unsuited to being a recluse. He liked parties, balls, dancing, liked people and jokes and having fun. Yet at present, even though he might be standing in the middle of a ballroom surrounded by laughing hordes, he still felt he was outside looking in, not a part of it. Connection. That was the one vital ability he needed in a wife, that she should be able to connect him to his life again. But to do so, she needed to connect with him, and that was where all the bright young things failed. They couldn't even see him clearly, let alone understand him. And he wasn't at all sure they had any real interest in that latter. Their notion of marriage, of the relationship underlying that state, seemed determinedly and unalterably fixed in the superficial, which to his mind came perilously close to deception, to pretense. After 13 years of lying, both living a lie and constantly dealing in fabrication, the last thing he would permit to touch his life, his real life, the one he was determined to reclaim, was any element of deceit. Fixing his gaze on the flames leaping in the hearth, he focused his mind on his objective, on finding the right lady. He'd had no difficulty rejecting all those he'd met thus far. Accustomed to gauging character swiftly, it usually took him no more than a minute. Yet identifying what characteristics his right lady possessed, let alone her whereabouts, had thus far defeated him. If she wasn't in London, where else should he look? The sound of footsteps, faint but definite, reached him. He blinked, listened. He dismissed his staff for the night. They'd gone to their beds long ago. Boots, not shoes. The boot steps marched nearer and nearer from the rear of the house. By the time the steps reached the back of the hall, not far from the library, he knew that whoever was strolling through his house after midnight wasn't any servant. No servant walked with that relaxed, assured tread. He glanced at the hounds. As aware as he, they remained slumped, stationary but alert, their amber eyes fixed on the door. He knew that stance. If the person came in, the hounds would rise and greet them, but otherwise were content to let that person pass. Cassius and Brutus knew more than he. They knew who the person was. Straightening in his chair,